This is a Front Porch podcast, and I'm here with Kelsey Long today. And Kelsey is a longtime resident of Oak Park. You also live and work here, so welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Can you tell me a little bit about when you moved to Oak Park, how you got here?
Sure. Yeah. I think my parents moved to Oak Park in 1990 or 1991. I was born in 93. So,
oh gosh,
I've been here since 93. Yeah. And I lived here, for all my childhood. And I lived in Portland, Oregon for 6 years. When I was 18, I moved there for school. But the whole time I was in Oregon, I knew that I would return after school stuff was wrapped up. So I came back to Oak Park in 2017. Yeah.
Okay, so just a couple years ago.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Tell me a little bit about what your experience was growing up here in the neighborhood.
My experience here was really lovely. I think I had a very fortunate childhood in that, we knew a lot of our neighbors. We were really blessed to have neighbors who were very close to my family. So my main babysitters when I was very young were like our next door neighbors. And I went to a weekly kind of Bible school sort of club on Tuesday afternoons called Vacation Bible School, where we were given hostess treats, wrapped in cellophane for memorizing Bible verses. And they told Bible stories with like felt little figurines.
The flannel graph.
Yes, thank you. And we are blessed to have one of these very double deep Oak Park kind of lots. And so we always had a large vegetable garden. And that was my experience growing up here. I think, I didn't go to school in the neighborhood. I think that really is a distinction between my experience and that of others who've lived in Oak Park for a long time. I went to a really great public school a couple neighborhoods over. And so I didn't have, once I was school age, most of my childhood friends were not in Oak Park. But we did know the people who we lived around, and we're blessed to just have like close, loving relationships with the people on our block or a block over, and have connection to the earth and to our home. My father is a very talented carpenter and built our house, so really feel deeply connected to this place in that way.
Oh, wow. So you moved away for college, and you said you always knew you'd come back. What was it about this place that just the home, that it's home? Or
Yeah, I think I always knew I wanted to be close to my parents. I'm not a parent, but I knew I certainly did not want a parent without my parents.
Got it.
We have a large family, and I look forward to sharing and parenting alongside my large family. And I also just felt called to be of service here. I've always been really aware of my privilege and just good fortune, and have felt called to be connected to my community here, offer what I can to my neighbors. And I've been able to do that kind of like miraculously. I moved home, and I started working very soon after moving home. I started working for Sacramento Food Bank and Family Services, which of course is founded here in Oak Park by Father Dan Madigan and is on Broadway. And now, of course, I work at Wellspring, founded by Sisters of Social Service and just a block away from the food bank. And so I just always knew that this is where I wanted to be, mostly for my family, but also because this is where we are. And I feel grounded in that. And I think being in the place that I've always been, mm-hmm. and having the opportunity to be of service in that place really offers me kind of a grounded experience that I value.
So what was it that really led you to want to serve the neighborhood and be in service, dedicating your life to that?
Well, it's not, if you're from Oak Park, you're aware of kind of the suffering that happens in this community, and I'm not sure. I know that everyone deserves to be loved and to be cared for and to have their needs met, and to be treated as though they're important and that they are an important member of the community. And that's what always made sense to me. Initially, I thought that my work would focus around affordable housing and home ownership, because being homeowners in this neighborhood was always so important to my family and offered us stability and connection to the earth in a way that I wish for everyone. My degree ultimately is in social work, and so that goal kind of shifted and the neighborhood shifted. And so as home ownership became less accessible here, it became clear that, maybe working around that was not what I was meant to do. But yeah, kind of that service-oriented work is what makes sense for me. And I love working with people. I love people. I think people are interesting and funny, and just every person is their own fascinating ecosystem. And so I feel blessed to work with people.
Thanks. So you've said several times now that it's really important to you to be connected to the earth and your family's garden. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Oh, man, I could talk about gardening forever. I love growing stuff. Yeah, my father is a forever backyard gardener. His father, a forever backyard gardener. Both my grandparents. My mother, who at her home is an amazing gardener and canner. I think it's an innate part of the human experience to be connected to growing food and growing other kinds of things. And I didn't realize that until I did it myself. So I watched my parents each have their own really lovely large gardens as a child. And then in Portland, my friend group and I, when we finally got our own house and we weren't in the dorms, the first thing, absolutely top of the list, we wanted a backyard so that we could have a garden. And our first garden was in, my mom calls it the Goodwill garden, because we grew everything in these plastic, like Rubbermaid bins, the kind that you might store Christmas decorations in. We just drilled holes in the bottoms of them and dumped potting soil, and we produced a ton of food. I mean, so much food just that way.
Really? That's amazing.
Yeah. I had, I think, 3 or 4 summers of that garden format, and each summer grew and grew, and it was quite the Goodwill garden. We also didn't have a car, so we were like lugging tomato cages on the bus, and we made it happen. And I really fell in love with growing food. And really that first garden came out of, like, we wanted to be eating healthy food that we just couldn't afford. And we both had parents who were gardeners, and we were like, if we just had our own tomato plant, then we wouldn't have to spend our money on this. And then from there, the love really happened, and I connected to it in a way that I didn't fully appreciate as a child. And of course, then I moved home, and we have quite a large backyard, like many folks in Oak Park do. And I came in with plans. I had been dreaming of layouts for that backyard for years, and in Portland as a renter, and just thinking about how excited I was to go back to a place that we owned, and so I could put permanent things, right? Like, to plant a tree is something really different than to plant a tomato plant. And both are beautiful, but a tree, man, is like, I'm invested here.
Yeah, and that's an investment.
Yes. And anyhow, I planted a whole bunch of fruit trees this spring, and I'm so excited to eat nectarines and apricots and pomegranates and all the things that I've planted. So that's gardening. And Oak Park has this beautiful gardening history. Way before Sacramento was the farm to fork place, people like Oak Park is the farm to fork place, right? People have these large yards,
Lots of fruit trees.
lots of fruit trees around. The whole neighborhood just drips in citrus all winter long. Literally, like, it's so abundant, we're just wasting it.
Right.
All over the place. And lots of people have kitchen gardens and always have long before it was popular. Or a lot of deep history and knowledge there. And what felt natural and right in our space. I have a community garden plot here at Oak Park Soul, which is a beautiful story of neighbors coming together and transforming what was basically a junkyard into a large community garden. Of course, now there's all of these really inspiring urban agriculture projects happening across the neighborhood. Some longstanding, some new. So,
No, there's been a lot around gardening. I know someone came in and put in raised beds for us at one point.
yeah.
That, oh no, I did keep them. I just moved them.
Cool.
As well, at the time before I had a weed incursion, things were growing better in the ground than they were in the containers. So I'm like, well, this is really great, but I want to use the ground in this space. So
Yeah. Cool.
So I did keep them, but I know that for a while there were a lot of people still had those and use those. And
Yeah. I don't have raised beds. We're right in the dirt, but they're a great way to work with the space if your ground is really hard. We're really blessed to have very fertile soil. Like I said, we've had a garden for a long time, and so I came in and I'm really able to build on soil that's been tended to for 20 years by a much more talented gardener than me and my father. So, yeah.
You're fortunate to have that.
I am, yeah. And we're also surrounded by gardeners where we are. So, next door, a man who's lived next door to us for as long as I've been alive has a chicken coop, and he always has kind of a cycle of chickens that he moves through. And on the other side of us, our neighbor is a very avid, very skilled and knowledgeable gardener. And behind us, similarly, Charlie is a wonderful gardener. And we have this large oak tree, like, of course, many folks around here do. And the oak tree kind of straddles all of our yards. And I love thinking about how this oak tree is kind of the umbrella of all of these gardening projects and approaches to gardening and growing food, and how we all probably have really similar soil, and we've all got our kind of oak tree friend overlooking us and protecting us, but we're all manifesting that growth in really different ways. I think that probably happens all across Oak Park.
Yeah, no, I think it does. I know several of my neighbors are gardening. I wish their English was better because I really want to learn from my neighbor over here over the back fence. Because whatever they're doing over there is amazing.
Cool. I think I might hear their chickens.
No, those are mine.
Those are yours. Awesome.
So, what else about this neighborhood do you think is something that, has been important to you?
I think it's a neighborhood with a lot of history. A lot of families here go way back with Oak Park. And so that offers a richness to a place that I don't know. Maybe it exists other places, and I'm sure it does. But here, many people, it's like, oh yeah, this was my grandma's house, and I grew up here, and now I'm here. Or they really know their neighbors, not just their neighbors, but their neighbors' auntie, and used to date this person, right? I mean, just this like real community in a way that I have a sense is becoming less common as we, as a culture, tend to, work in places where we don't live, and we shop online, and we, take our children to sports obligations rather than to the neighborhood park, or these different things. And there's nothing wrong with any of those things. I just think Oak Park does still, in many places, have this community feeling that is special.
Oh, I think of all of the places I've lived, this is the first one where, yes, we moved in and all of the neighbors came to tell me which of their relatives had lived in the house before.
Yes.
And most of, many of them had been here at least since the 60s or 70s.
Yeah. And I also think, we can't talk about Oak Park without talking about diversity, right? This is a place where people of color, families of color of all different kinds have thrived and lived in community. And that's really special. I moved to Portland and was very excited to be in a very progressive place. And it is a very progressive place, and it's a beautiful city. And I was also like, wow, everybody's here. Everybody's white. Wild.
Okay.
Like, really noticeably different. And then through my schoolwork, actually, I learned that Sacramento, and this is, I think I was looking at data from maybe 10 years ago, so maybe this has changed. But at the time, Sacramento was the second most diverse city in all of the United States, second only to Oakland.
Mm-hmm.
So thinking about that, and then thinking about Oak Park as this especially diverse neighborhood within this especially diverse city, that I just think that's very special. And for the white folks who are a part of this community, that's very special, because it's a blessing to learn from people who are different than you, and to be in genuine relationship with people who are different than you. And I feel blessed.
Yeah. Well, I think, being able to know your neighbors and learn from them and learn about their cultures and what life has been like, when it's different from you is, it is a blessing. And I think this is, the most diverse neighborhood I've had experience with. I spent quite a long time in Long Beach, which also is a quite diverse city, but it's a diverse city in that here is the small section where the Cambodians live, and here is a section where, the Latino people live, and here is a section where the black, black here, white there. And, I remember people, well, it's so cool. You walk 4 blocks, then everything's different. But it was very compartmentalized. And that is different here.
Yeah, absolutely. I have to share this story because it's really, I think, a beautiful story. Beautiful for me. I was gardening in my front yard, and our front yard has just been purely weeds. When I talk about a love of gardening, trust and believe, my garden does not look particularly beautiful. It's overrun by weeds, and it has phases anyways. So I'm trying to battle the weeds in the front yard, and decided that this is farm to fork. Like, we're scratching the weeds. We're not even going to try on the lawn, and we're going to grow food in the front. And so I'm turning the dirt over, and a neighbor who I've known my whole life, he and his wife, really took my parents under their wing when they moved here to Oak Park. And so he walks by the front yard and asks me what I'm doing and what I'm going to plant. And I said, I think I'm going to do all corn. I'm going to do like a corn patch in the front yard because I don't know what to put here. It'll grow quick and it'll be strong and healthy and interesting. And then maybe next year I'll think of something more permanent or appropriate. And he was floored by that. And he is a black man who grew up in the South, and he's older than my parents. And so he was raised in the segregated South. And he said to me, wow, like, my people are sharecroppers. We're sharecroppers. And I can't even imagine doing something like that. I would never put a big corn patch in my front yard. He said, you must be so free. And I can't even imagine feeling that free. And I want to, and I want to do something like that someday. And I just was like blown away by that.
Interesting.
It was so beautiful of him to trust me with that story and to be open to sharing that with me. Never in a million years would that have occurred to me. That's not the, experience of my family or my people. And that's what I mean. It's beautiful to have, like, this person knew me before I could walk or talk, right? Like, this is the first person I ever saw in the world wear Birkenstocks. This is like an original hippie idol of my life. I just really think about that all the time and think about what it means to be free and to have the freedom to make those kinds of just fun choices. And what a blessing it is when someone offers that kind of perspective to you. So.
That was a beautiful thing for him to share. And I think, I get it, because for a lot of people, there is a stigma, growing your own food for a while went from being, a sign of independence to, a sign of being, lower class, that you couldn't afford, this or that. And, I think that has changed recently, that people are recognizing that, in addition to just being good for your soul, to grow things and care for them, there is something about independence, that I can eat better food. I can't afford pastured eggs.
Right.
But I can afford chickens.
Right. And now that I absolutely agree. I think that's where we're getting with acknowledging, like, the power of producing our own food. Something I think about all the time is how much of a privilege that is.
It is a privilege.
Because so many people, especially this community, right? Especially this earth, this patch of soil here in Oak Park, as so many are being displaced from the community, those of us who still can produce food in this soil, in this place, are really, really fortunate.
Yeah.
I think it's one of the great privileges of my life to be able to plant a fruit tree, Really. And to trust and know that if I keep it alive, if I can manage to keep the thing alive, my family gets to eat that food. And that's a great privilege in this time and place that we're in.
Yeah. So you've been here for quite a long time. I wonder, what changes do you think, we were talking before we started about just the amount of change I've seen in 13 years, but you've been here so much longer. What do you think are the most remarkable changes in the neighborhood, as the the community aspect still seems to be holding on, but things are different also?
I think it's the things that everyone's talking about, as far as the housing crisis, gentrification. I think the main difference is just who's here.
Okay.
Definitely that sense of community remains. I think a lot of people who are Oak Park, right? They grew up here. Their grandmas and aunties are here. This is their community, and they live here, but they're not housed here. That is so much more common than I think it ever has been. And that's the primary difference I see. And I think that ripples out. And so...
How so?
For people who still live here, watching other people be displaced is deeply anxiety-inducing.
Okay.
Because I think many people who are renters here know that they're next. The rent's not going to go down. Yeah. And so that is very unsettling, I think. And I think it's that knowledge sits in us. And that's the primary difference I see, is just who has the good fortune of being here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The cost of housing is just wild. I mean, it's wild.
No,
I have
absolutely.
been priced out of this community, right? Like I couldn't rent here. I'm able to rent here because I'm renting from family. I absolutely could not be a homeowner here. And that is wild to me.
Yeah.
Because when I left in 2011, I figured I'm going to go get a college degree and I'm going to move home and I'm going to buy a fixer-upper in Oak Park. And that is just like absolutely inaccessible to me as a social worker. It would be inaccessible to me probably in many other fields because of the housing market here. And that's a lot of people's reality.
Yeah.
And that's me with a lot of privilege. And so that reality certainly hits harder for people without such privilege to be educated and supported by family.
Well, I can sense that. Yeah, you're in the same boat as a lot of the other people who grew up here, which is just sad that you grew up in a place and this is your home and you don't have a choice to be sure that you can stay. That would be very, very sad.
It is sad.
I feel that, I think, from neighbors and people that I've talked to, is they're concerned about being able to stay close to the community they grew up in.
Yeah. And there's not really other affordable places to live in Sacramento. If there was somewhere else for people to relocate to where they could stay in this vicinity, that would be one thing. But the housing crisis is so dramatic. It's difficult for people to find anywhere to afford to live here.
Anywhere, because
right. Yes, this is
every
not
once
unique.
in a while I've looked in where I grew up, which is one of the poorest school districts in the county. I saw the data and I was like, really? But I think I could afford a double wide on a half acre in a place that, was not necessarily a place where there were lots of wealthy people.
Yeah.
Goodness, we only have a couple minutes left. What else, if you had one more thing that you could say about your experience in the neighborhood and living here, what would it be?
I think there's such a richness here, and that is worth acknowledging and honoring and preserving. I don't want to talk about the housing crisis as something that is inevitable or done. There are policy measures and protections that can be taken to support a community like Oak Park in remaining a place that people who are from the neighborhood can continue to live. And there are lots of good ideas about that here in the community. And we can use this diversity, not just cultural and racial diversity, but diversity of thought and experience and skill in finding the path forward. There's just such a depth here that's worth tapping into in future planning.
Got it. Just finding a way to tap into that and come together and come up with a solution that works for the neighborhood.
Right. And I think people are doing that, and it's beautiful to see. Every community garden plot or, neighborhood association meeting or block party where people are talking about these issues is that. Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time, Kelsey. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.